Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today you're seeing Call of Duty Modern Warfare in full fat 4K. I managed to get the game on PC and I'm running it at max settings 4K and I'm capturing it in 4K so I can show you guys in all its glory, and it is one handsome looking game at these settings on PC. Like, this is worth showcasing, and I thought it would be an interesting segue into talking about next generation consoles, because I realised I haven't really talked about it yet on this channel, despite back in the day PlayStation 4 versus Xbox One was such a big talking point for me. Real interesting story of me trying to work out what I'd go for. Would I go PlayStation 4 or Xbox One? And originally I did go towards PlayStation 4, but in the end I got both and I've enjoyed both, and think that Xbox One X and PlayStation 4 Pro, the enhanced versions, are actually good consoles in their own right, respectively. You know, one's got fantastic exclusives and the other is just a total powerhouse. So there are good reasons to own both, in my opinion. But going into the next generation, I'm not really sure what I want to go for, and I suppose it's quite early on still. We have an idea of some of the specs we're going to see with the next generation, but it's not until you start seeing them actually running games and seeing frame rates and resolutions that you can be truly comfortable with what's the superior option, the Series X or the PlayStation 5. Just listening to some rumors from developers, PlayStation 5 apparently has the edge. We can't really know anything for sure yet, so I'm not taking that as a reason just go with the PlayStation 5. I want to see full details of specs listed before I go with that. But similar to before, it sounds like they're going for parity as much as they can. They're both having SSDs this time, for example. I mean, it wouldn't have been a good idea to have been the console that didn't go with SSD, because it would have seriously powered in comparison to the competition. And SSDs is probably what I'm most excited about with next gen, to be honest, because when I'm using my enhanced consoles, that spinning hard drive is what really makes them feel old, to be honest. It's probably that primarily, and then the CPUs. The thing about this generation of consoles is that they've got fantastic GPUs, fantastic graphics units, but their processors have been quite weak. Even when they came out, they weren't particularly great. And in some games, you don't really feel this. Something like Doom 2016 was designed to really be reliant on the GPU, and as a result, it looks absolutely fantastic on the consoles and it runs at a great frame rate. But something like the Assassin's Creed series can sometimes struggle to hold even 30 FPS because it's a series that is very CPU dependent, given all the NPCs that are walking around, the massive open world. There's a lot of tasks that are traditionally more CPU dependent. So with games like that, you've never even really dreamed of seeing them go at 60 FPS on a console, because the processor simply hasn't been up to it as good as the GPU might have been. And this is what would really impress me. If they could show an Assassin's Creed game running at 60 FPS, that would absolutely blow me away, because it's a series that, even on a really powerful PC, can seriously struggle to run at a high frame rate. Like on my 1080 Ti, I got to turn the resolution all the way down to 1080p. I can turn the graphics up a bit, but I cannot go too high with the resolution, and only then can I get a reasonably stable 60. And also, I mean, during the Xbox Series X talk, there was rumours of 120 frames per second, which would be nice, but I suppose that's going to be quite specific to certain games. Again, if we consider something like Assassin's Creed, there's no way. There is no way. Like, I can say this with total confidence. We won't be seeing a console running an Assassin's Creed game at 120 frames per second, but maybe something like Forza, something that traditionally has run at a high frame rate. Not Forza Horizon, but the typical Forza series has always performed very well. Maybe that is something we could see with a performance mode that can do 120 frames per second at 1080p, especially as on the Xbox One X, you can already get Forza 7 to go at 4K 60, so it's not an unreasonable jump to do that. But I can only imagine certain games are going to make it to 120. But the biggest thing I'm not sure about, to be honest guys, for these consoles is the price. Because a Ryzen CPU and an SSD, particularly the SSD, that's surely got to do something to the price. I just can't imagine these consoles being cheap if the capacity is anything higher than 512 gigabytes. But as a lot of people might say now, well, as we're getting more and more 4K games with 4K textures, that is very expensive in terms of the storage budget. And therefore, is 512 gigabytes sufficient going into the next generation? A lot of people would say no, it's not. Which means that for these consoles to have a strong storage solution, you're effectively looking at 1 terabyte of SSD. And that alone, disregarding the CPU, the GPU, that cannot be cheap. Which is why, although I've heard this confirmed nowhere, I do wonder, guys, I do wonder if they're using some sort of hybrid system, a bit like how an iMac has a fusion drive, where essentially it's got a portion of the hard drive is solid state, and then another aspect of the hard drive is conventional spindle, right? And the benefit there is that you shift your frequently accessed programs, or in this case, frequently accessed games, onto your solid state, and then you keep the games you probably don't play much on the conventional spinning hard drive. And that's how you manage to get some aspect of fast solid state storage, but also you get the higher capacity. Obviously, a 1 terabyte SSD is the ideal, but it's hard for me to imagine that being in the price range that is acceptable for a console. And this is the thing about console pricing. As much as I personally would have no issue spending £1,000 on a console if it had the specs to match, I don't want to just buy an expensive device if it had the specs to match. That's not really viable for the console model, because the way they work is they will try and sell as many units as they possibly can, even if that means taking a loss, because the real money is in the licensing cost they get from selling the games on their platform. That's where the real money is. I think Microsoft have acknowledged that heavily this generation, where they just want to get an Xbox into your home no matter what, because then they can sell you the games and make the money off the licensing cost. And the licensing cost, by the way, is why console games cost more than PC games on average, because you don't have that with PC. You only have it with consoles. It's why it's more expensive. So I can't imagine that they'll go up to the £1,000 mark. I've not heard any reason to believe that, but at the same time, these specs sound extremely promising. Like, I'm super excited about them for sure, but there has to be, I would have thought, some aspect of compromise. So I can only imagine that's if they just have 512 gigabyte SSDs, because 1 terabyte SSD is going to be pricey, or if they have some sort of a hybrid solution in place, or if there's another compromise somewhere else in the system, because although the CPU is supposed to be very good, the Ryzen CPUs and the SSD, I haven't heard a lot about the GPUs. Like, I'm sure they're a leap over the enhanced consoles, but how much of a leap are they? Is this where they're consolidating? Are they trying to not bring anything up by too much, but instead bring all of the components up together in relative unison, which is an intelligent idea, because I think one of the greatest flaws of the current generation consoles is that they took the GPU super far, but then left everything else behind, so to speak. So they were really good at certain games, but quite poor at others. Maybe that's what they're doing, and so the GPU will only be slightly improved. So here's the fun part of the video where I'm going to just say what I think for the sake of simplicity, let's just say what the PlayStation 5 is going to cost. What do I think it's going to cost based on the fact it's been described to have very impressive specs, but also it is a console and therefore needs to appeal and be affordable to a mass market. So I think the PlayStation 5 will be £499.99. and in the US, $549.99. That's what I'm saying right now. I think that's the balance. I think if they go any higher than that, they'll start to price out the average consumer. You know, as you get older, you start to forget that, look, kids do buy these consoles. They need to be affordable by families, but equally, they are described to be very powerful. So that feels like the balance to me. That's where I think we will see these consoles priced. Maybe it'll be too much, but that's what I'm saying right now. So, as always, people, thanks very much for watching and see you next time.